Alright, let's build ourselves a dashboard. We're going to use COUNTIFS here, we're going to use SUMIFS here. We're also going to build in some data validation, which we covered in the first section. And basically the idea here is to take the raw data that we have and create a dynamic little dashboard along with a visual to kind of give you an idea of how these functions can be used as a really cool actual analytical tool. So I'm on the team salary dashboard tab of the section for statistical functions Excel workbook, and the first step that I'm going to do is to turn cell C2 into a data validation cell. And basically I want it to allow a list of all the unique values for each team, and that's it. So first thing I need is that source list. To get that, I'm going to click the salary data tab. I'm going to start in B2, Control Shift arrow down, and hit Control C to copy. Now I'm just going to create a new tab here and paste that data. This is kind of just a scrap sheet, and without deselecting it, I'm just going to go to the data tab, hit the remove duplicate buttons, and hit OK. That will tell me that 33 unique values remain, which are each of the individual team names. So I'll hit OK. That's going to become the source list for my data validation dropdown. So let's jump back to team salary dashboard, back to cell C2, go into data, data validation, click the data validation button, and then in the allow dropdown, we're going to choose list, and in the source section, we're going to choose the data selector there, jump to sheet 2, select A1, Control Shift arrow down to A33, and then press that same button again to lock it in. So now if we press OK, we've got our drop-down list of each team. So that's step one. Step two is actually populating this array of data using a COUNTIF and a SUMIF formula to pull in the correct data based on the team and the year. So as you can tell, there are two criteria that we're dealing with here, which means we have to use the SUMIFS and COUNTIFS versions of the functions. So let's get started. For total salary, since we're going to be summing an actual data range, we need to use a SUMIFS here. So I'm going to start with the SUMIFS formula, open the parenthesis, and remember my first component is the sum range. So what am I taking the sum of? Well, this is the salary column, so I'm going to be taking the sum of salary. That data lives in the salary data sheet in column E. So I'm going to select that whole column. I'm going to press F4 to lock it in, just in case this formula moves from column to column. I want to always calculate salary in this case. I'm going to hit the comma to get to my criteria range 1. So I have two criteria that I'm working with here, team and year. It doesn't matter which order I go in. I could set my team criteria first, then year, or vice versa. So in this case, let's just do team first. So criteria range 1 is the range in which my first criteria values live. So if I'm doing team first, that's going to be column B. Again, I'll lock it in with the F4 shortcut. And then when I comma over, the next piece that I need is the actual criteria that I'm looking to pull out of range 1 or looking to identify within range 1. And that value is going to be found in cell C2. So I'm going to lock that again. That means whatever team name is populated in cell C2 is going to be fed into this SUMIFS formula. So comma over, now I'm on criteria range 2. So my second criteria is the year. So where do my years live? They live in salary data column A. Again, F4 to fix it. And then comma to my last piece of the function, which is criteria 2. So how do I know what year I care about in this instance? If I go back to the dashboard tab, I care about the year in column B, and in this case it's the value in B5 because I'm dealing with the total salary for 2010. Now an important point of distinction here, if I were to lock B5 in completely with the F4 shortcut, close the parenthesis, and enter the formula, I'm getting the correct salary for 2010 for Arizona. If I drag this down, you'll see that I get the exact same salary every single time. The reason that's the case is because if you watch the formula itself, as I click down, nothing's changing because every reference is completely fixed. That's almost correct, except the one thing that I do want to shift is the reference to the year name. It's kind of tough to see there, but if I scroll down and hit F2 to kind of dive in, you can see that in every case I'm referring to B5 and only B5. So if I go back into my original formula in C5, I want the B to be fixed, but I want the 5 to shift to row 6, 7, 8, and 9 as I move this formula down. So I'm just going to remove the fixed reference before the 5 and press enter again. Now if I apply this down, it will update properly. So that's my total salary column. For the number of players, in this case we don't want to sum any values, we just want to take a count of the number of players under those same two criteria, team and year. So I'm just going to do equals COUNTIFS, criteria range 1, which is team. So where do my teams live? Salary data, column B, fix it. And what's my criteria? Whatever team I've selected in cell C2. Criteria range 2 is year. Where do my years live? Salary data, column A. And then criteria 2 is whatever year that I care about, which is in B5. And I'm going to hit F4 3 times to cycle through until I've fixed the B but not the 5. Close the parenthesis, hit enter, and there you go. So this is telling me that Arizona has 26 players in the data sample for 2010, 27 for 2011 and 12, and so on and so forth. So for average salary, you could use an average ifs here. What I'm going to do, since I have the total salary and I have the number of players, I'm just going to take the simple route and just use simple division here. So I'm going to take C5 divided by the number of players. So team salary divided by number of players equals average salary per player. And I'm just going to apply that down. And if I want to get rid of these decimals, I can go into the Home tab and just hit this decrease decimal button twice. And now I've rounded to the nearest dollar. So there you go. This chart is already tied to the data in those ranges, so it will update automatically as you cycle through. Now you can see how each team has kind of adjusted their salaries and how the average salaries have changed over time. So there you go. Pretty simple example of how to build a dynamic dashboard and how to use these formulas in more of an analytical way. Alright, so that wraps up the statistical functions section. Next up we have lookup reference functions, which is one of my favorite sections. So get excited.